She was the only woman, a lover, a courtesan in Versailles who had more rooms than the queen, and was treated even better than a queen. Françoise Athénaïde Marquise de Montespan, the mistress who wore a crown without even needing one. Imagine Bridgerton were real, but instead of polite scandals and ballroom gossip, we step into the French court of the 1600s, a world of black masses, whispered murders, child sacrifices, love potions, betrayals, torture, and forbidden affairs. Tonight, we're talking about the affair of the poisons, where Versailles traded lace and roses for arsenic and shadows. Welcome to the Boudoir Stories with Lyra Karina. Scandal trapped with Marquise de Brinvilliers, a French aristocrat, poisoner, and a scandal in heels. She murdered her father and brother for their estates. Her secret, revealed only after lover's death, exposed their letters of poisons and passion. And how did she test her brows? Maybe on children, on her dogs? Try to guess. No, rumor says she slipped them to patients in hospitals, poisoning as a saintly lady while killing over 30 innocents. She played a saint and watched people die from her poison. It's insane. At her trial, she didn't beg for forgiveness. She smirked. Why me, if you all do the same? Her execution sparked the infamous affairs of the poisons, when Paris, crawling with witches and warlocks, turned into Europe's most dangerous playground. And here's the thing, Darwin. In the late 1600s, Paris was crawling with witches and warlocks, alchemists and fortune tellers. More than 400 of them lived in Paris, trading in black magic, poisons and spell, while in Great Britain women were being burned as witches. In Paris, witchcraft wasn't a folklore, it was business, and it was thriving. And this wasn't just peasant business, oh no. The web of poisons and black magic reached all the way to Versailles itself, to the most famous courtesan of Louis XIV, the Françoise Athénaïde Marquise de Montespan. At only 19, she entered Versailles as a lady-in-waiting to the queen. Every day she took communion, cloaking herself in piety, and soon the devout Spanish queen saw her picture of virtue. At 22, she married a nobleman from her province, the Marquis de Montespan, a year younger than herself. It was a brilliant match, rank, position, and power neatly sealed with a wedding vow. But Françoise Athénaïde had no intentions of stopping there. Her eyes wandered higher, to the silken gilded world of the king's mistress, Louisa de la Vallière. It wasn't long before the king's gaze fell upon her, and Montespan made sure he would never look at La Vallière the same way again. She erased her from his heart. How she managed it? That's a secret, my darling, and you will explore it a little bit later. Her husband refused to share his marriage bed with the king. He slapped her, cursed Louis, and dared to complain aloud. Louis, in return, was shameless, invoking the Bible, pointing to the King David as his holy president. He told the Marquise plainly, "Give me your wife, or God himself will punish you." The Marquise ceased, but loudly named his king all the worst names, and even Louis, the Sun King himself, master of the power and pride, felt wounded that he could not strike back at a man whose wife had become his mistress. But the Marquis was clever. He slipped into the shadows and in 1677 even secured a divorce. and now so new courtesan of the king, with her limitless influence, her brilliant pride, her dazzling ambition, became the joy, the hope, and the terror of courtiers, ministers, and general alike. In her glittering salon gathered the very cream of aristocracy and the arts. She was the patroness of Racine and Boileau, secured a pension for the venerable Corneille, and gave her hand to Lully. She knew exactly what artists and poets needed: encouragement, opportunity, and just the right amount of admiration. Those who lived in her orbit, maids, nieces, admirers, inevitably began to echo her speech. Her wit, her style, she was an it girl. Madame de Sévigné, a sharp-tongued writer who scribbled down every courtly whisper, think of her as a modern version of Bridgerton, but in Versailles, a narrator. Except this wasn't fiction. She chronicled the entire saga of the Poissons affair, the dazzling reign of Madame de Montespan, how she rose to become the true queen of the court, and how in the end she lost it all. She declared her beauty extraordinary, her gowns as ravishing as her face, her merry spirit as dazzling as her jewels. She called her radiantly beautiful, supremely confident. Gold upon gold, embroidered in gold, trimmed in gold, threaded with gold, and sprinkled with golden trinkets. The whole gown shimmered like enchantment, a creation of such impossible artistry that only a sorcerer could have conjured it. Sadly, nowadays we can reach the moon, but the artisanships of those times is totally lost. The Marquise was only a courtesan in Versailles who had more rooms than the Queen herself. She occupied 20 rooms on the ground floor, while the Queen herself had only 11 above, and only poor people and less privileged people lived on the second and above floors. The Queen's train was carried by a mere page, the Marquise by the senior lady-in-waiting. When she rode out, she was flanked by the King's guards. If she traveled through the provinces, governors and intendants were obligated to greet her in person as a true queen, and entire towns sent offerings in her honor. Her carriage rolled with a 6-horse team, followed by another filled with her ladies. Behind came wagons of treasures, 7 mules laden with luggage, and 12 horsemen to complete her glittering convoy. Madame de Montespan was the mistress who wore a crown without even needing one. The Marquise bore Louis 7 children, legitimate by a parliament. One became a Duke of Maine, a daughter married the Duke of Bourbon. Her blood shaped the history of Europe. Louis's passion for the Marquise burned for years, over 13 years. But, going back, by 1672 she was consumed with jealousy, shattering herself away, writing all day, then tearing her pages to shreds at night. No one pitied her, even though she had done much good. 3 years later, history repeated itself. Louis became too religious, but whispers said maybe he was just simply tired of her. The proud Marquise had to swallow the ultimate humiliation on Holy Thursday in 1675. Her priest refused abolition, and the king sent his disgusting mistress away. Straight after came Princess de Soubise, who loved the king out of love for her husband. She slept with the king, took her privileges, her fortune, then happily returned to her marriage and to her happy husband. I think back in the days, for a woman it was something like a big promotion to be in the bed with the monarch. Yet soon Montespan glittered brighter than even, dripping in diamonds. Court whispered, gasped, "Their love is burning again." Who ever heard of such a resurrection after 3 years of exile? At 38, the Marquise faced a rival, young enough to be her daughter. In 1679, Mademoiselle de Fontache, just 18, with a wheat gold hair, vast grey eyes, skin like milk, and cheeks like roses, court gossips swore that she was an angel from head to toe. Her family had sent her to Versailles with one mission: to turn her beauty into fortune. Out of jealousy for Mademoiselle de Fontache, the Marquise suddenly tried to leave court, one contemporary noted. But Louis loved his mistresses on his own terms, not theirs. He would not let her go. Just as Lavinier once stood as a backdrop to young Montespan's triumph, now Montespan herself was forced to watch the king parade his new beauty before her very eyes. She hoped distance might renew his passion in time, but Louis kept her close, making her witness every glance, every touch as painful as possible. Louis' tender passion for the young Marquise de Fontache was no secret, and Montespan saw her own downfall looming. Desperate, she turned into dark rites, slipping naked into a cold altar, presiding over black masses where infant blood was poured into a bowl placed between her thighs. And all in the name of keeping the king's love, and yet the magic failed. Fontache's reign was short, barely 2 years. Later in June 1681 she died, blood loss in childbirth, or perhaps a poison. She herself was certain Montespan had done it. Louis suspected the same, but her family blocked an autopsy. The truth was buried with the young lady. Today we know that Fontache had reasons to fear. Montespan was obsessed with eliminating her rival. She was a steady client of a witch and poison maker, lavishly. Lavishly clientage reached across all classes. She had a real business in time when women couldn't have a business, of course. She had a lot of employees with a big variety of services: abortions, love poisons, deadly poisons, fortune tellers, fortune telling. Arrested right on the steps of Notre Dame, far outshone those the poisoner Marquise de Brinvilliers, who killed the father, brother, and more 30 people. Her deeds were so vile that the king's own prosecutor, La Reine, was shocked. In Lavisly's garden, they unearthed horror 2,500 of tiny bodies, the remains of infants and fetuses. And when they asked why she owned such an enormous oven, she just said and purred, "Why? To make my little pâtés." The stash of red poison alone could have wiped out half of the tiresome husbands of Paris. But that wasn't the real scandal. Yet, the real shock was the names in her little book. The Duchess of Orleans, the Duchess of Bouillon, and yes, the radiant Marquise de Montespan herself, the king's mistress, glittering mistress. Versailles gasped. After more than 210 hearings, the tribunal pronounced judgment on 440 souls, and Louis himself declared there will be no mercy, no discounts for rank or privilege, not even for those glittering at his own court. Of course he lied. Madame de Sévigné ever found a good spectacle attending the execution of the Marquise de Brinvilliers in 1676, the woman who poisoned her father, brother, and 30 people, and who was, Sévigné wrote, had already given her soul to the devil. And then came Lavisly's own daughter, the daughter of the poisoner. Margaret, eager to spill her mother's secrets, she told how wherever Montespan fretted over losing the king's favor, Lavishly was summoned to take the measures. These people did know the world know, nor did they recognize any limits of humanity. I felt so disgusted when I was reading this story. On her command, a priest would chant prayers while she kneaded her unholy dough, a mixture of sperm, bath, and menstrual blood, soil from the grave, and other horrible ingredients. During the Mass, the paste was slipped into the bowl, blessed with sacred words, then later strewed into the king's food. When the interrogation records reached Louis, he ordered them tossed into the fire in his own chamber. What survived is not the originals, but the notes of chief investigator Lorraine, along with a few fragments, the ghostly remains of Versailles' darkest secrets. Louis ordered the records burned the moment sentences were passed. But Lorraine knew he was walking on a razor's edge, and he disobeyed. Instead of burning the files, he slipped them into the archives in a secret space under the floor of the archive building, where a decade later, during the renovations of the archive, by accident, people found them. Real magic, can you imagine? Thanks to his actions, we know the full grotesque details of the so-called Black Masses, satanic parodies of the Catholic liturgy, and we know the name of the priest who led them, the infamous Abbat Giburg, who for 20 years performed his dark rites in a deserted church at the Saint Marcel. His services, shall we say, were very much in demand. Abbat Giburg rituals were pure theater of horror. He tortured wax dolls with pins while his assistant filled the bowl, and titled sinners played with their lovers at these black masses. The first was in 1673 inside the sacred chateau near Paris. In the chapel, Giburg performed mass over the naked body of the king's mistress, stretched across the altar. At the consecration, he invoked Asmodeus and Astaroth. Princess of love, I offer you this child. Grant that the king obey me, that princess honor me, that wherever I ask will be done. The child, bought for a single penny, was sacrificed, its blood baked into food. Witnesses swore it was true. His potions were no less obscene: dried moles, ground to dust, bat's blood, enchanted herbs mixed with wine, all destined for the king's lips, faked as a love food. By the end of 1673, the king's chief physician grew alarmed. His majesty was wrecked by dizzy spells, his face ashen, his body vesting like a shadow. He complained constantly on splitting headaches, and the signs pointed to Lavishly's powders, slipped into the royal dishes by two trusted servants. In one of those many moments when the king strayed from her, Montespan burned with such fury she plotted his death. By ancient custom, French kings accepted written petitions from any subject, and she schemed to lace one with poison, so a single touch, a single reading would strike Louis down. But she never got so close to him. On the March 1860-79, shaken by an ease, she ordered her daughter to burn the letter, just in time. For the very next day, Lavishly was arrested. When Montespan heard of Lavishly's arrest, her terror was limitless, but so was her fury. She knew her glittering world had collapsed, and that she herself was in danger. Only 37 people went to the flames with la poison. Through 147 were named in the affair. The king quietly warned his cousin, the Marquise de Mazarin, and she ran away. Montespan, shamed but still with a pension of 20,000 livres, was sent off to her estate. And the satanic Abbat Guibourg? He was locked away in a prison, left to rot with his devils. The king must have been shaken to his core, his mistress of many years, his love, the mother of his beloved legitimate children, accused of unspeakable crimes. But he could not have punished her. But how would it look to France, to all the Europe, if the Sun King allowed the mother of his royal blood to be burned? Such a scandal could not tarnish not just her name, but his dynasty. Curious, isn't it? That Louis seemed to, maybe he didn't know how another king, Henry of England, has dealt with his inconvenient wives. It was agony for Montespan to surrender the glittering world she had ruled for so long, 14 years. Yet at last, with great reluctance, she turned from Versailles to Penance. The same piety once mocked in her youth, now she returned with the badges. In 1691, she withdrew to the convent of Saint Joseph, which she herself had founded. There, Saint Simon tells us, she spent her days in mourning her sins and trying to barter diamonds for salvation. The king never saw her again. Even her children could visit her rarely, only by arrangement. Her confessor urged her to seek reconciliation with her husband, but the Marquise refused. Cut off from court, she poured her fortune into convents and charities until little remained. Saint Simon writes that she spent hours sewing rough cloth for the poor and forced her household to do the same. Her table, once full of excess, became empty. She never ceased to punish her body. Her linen, even her sheets, was so hard and harsh, worn beneath her fine gowns. She bound herself with spiked bracelets, belts, and garters that drew blood. Even her once feared tongue seemed enlisted in penance. The woman who had ruled Versailles now was in a full silence. Despite all her penance, Montespan lived in terror of death. She kept women by her side through the night, their only duty to chat and feast, so she could believe life was still around her. Her windows were sealed tight, her chamber flooded with candlelight, her bed ringed by watchful companions. But in May 1707, the day she had dreaded finally came. She confessed openly before her servants, begged forgiveness for her sins, received absolution, and died quietly. The king's reaction was icy. When the Duchess of Burgundy reproached him for his coldness, Louis replied that from the moment he banished her, he had resolved never to see her again. As tough she had already been, as though she had already been dead to him for years. She was the only courtesan in Versailles who had more rooms than the queen, and was treated even better than a queen. Madame de Montespan wasn't famous just for being Louis XIV mistress. She was famous because she turned mistresshood into power. She was the queen of Versailles without a crown. The woman who bent the Sun King orbit around her, and whose shadow still darkens history with scandal, seduction. She birthed a dynasty, 7 royal children, legitimized, married into France's greatest houses. Her bloodline shadowed the future of the monarchy. She wasn't just a decoration, she altered the history. But her downfall shows the danger of flying too close to the Sun King. Ambition gave her glory, but also consumed her. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I really recommend watching a beautiful TV show, Versailles, where you can see all those little and big secrets. Please like and comment this video. It's very important for promotion of this channel. Thank you, and see you in the next chapter.